Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a closer look at the Viwoods AiPaper. This is the world's slimmest large-screen eNote device that has a 10.65-inch screen but only measures 4.5 millimeters thick. It almost feels impossibly thin and super light as well at only 370 grams. But despite that, we are talking about essentially an Android tablet that has a large display, of course. It's using a Carta 1300 e-ink screen here, so it has a pretty sharp 300 ppi, and like the reMarkable or Kindle, of course e-ink is going to reduce the amount of glare if you're using it outdoors in direct sunlight. In fact, the brighter it is around you, the easier it is to see, behaving very similar to a natural piece of paper. The screen even has a matte paper-like treatment to it, making it feel a little bit more natural as you're writing using the included Wacom EMR stylus pen. There's a bit of added friction like a real pencil on paper. And luckily, it's not all about that impossibly slim and lightweight frame either, making it comfortable to hold, but the experience here also holds up, making this actually one of my favorite large-screen e-ink devices I've tested to date. And that comes down to a couple of aspects. To begin with, the actual inking experience, that is, writing on the display, feels extremely natural and seamless. There's almost no latency at all as you are just writing and doodling. Pressing harder versus lighter just feels extremely similar to a regular, again, pen and paper experience. This level of fluidity we have previously really only seen on the reMarkable 2, but it's actually matched here quite well, and for sure a little bit more speedy feeling compared to on the recent Bigme Pro e-ink tablet. Actually had a bit more lag when I was writing things down. I think it comes down to optimization, which luckily Viwoods have done really well. Secondly, this device also has a couple of additional controls or buttons at the very bottom of the screen, which is kind of a rarity on these larger screen eNotes, which tend to rely 100% on the touchscreen and gestures for navigation without any physical buttons at all. But on here, there is a home key as well as a back key. Regardless of where you are in the operating system and whatever task you're doing, you're able to navigate using these same consistent keys, which you can also disable if you don't want to use them. And thirdly, what I appreciate about the Viwoods device is even though they're taking inspiration design-wise from reMarkable 2, they've actually, I think, improved on it in some subtle ways. For example, underneath the hood, even though it looks completely different, it is technically running on a version of Android with a fairly capable octa-core processor, 4 gigs of RAM for an e-ink device, that is. And so you are able to access the Google Play Store and download thousands of additional applications, including other reading tools that may not be built in by default, like the Kindle app, reading comics, replying to emails, and other productivity apps, which you don't get on a reMarkable or Kindle Scribe because the operating system is proprietary and more locked down. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here, the simplicity and responsiveness of some of those reMarkable and Kindle Scribe devices, but also the flexibility of being able to download more apps if you choose to do so in the future. By the way, this model also has a built-in fingerprint scanner on the power key, which is also not something that we always see, making it easier to unlock with simply one touch with added biometrics for security. But taking a half step back, checking out what's included in the packaging here, has a premium eNote. It is presented quite well with a included folio case, magnetic, and automatically wakes the screen whenever you lift it open, as you saw there. Actually is working quite well. Even with the case, it still is extremely slim, nicely textured. By default, there is 128 gigabytes built on in, a quick user guide, as well as a plethora of replacement stylus nibs when it wears down. Again, it is using the standard Wacom EMR battery-less electromagnetic technology, so it can also be compatible with styluses that work on the reMarkable 2 as well as the Kindle Scribe. You can find more third-party options to try out. In fact, even Samsung's Galaxy Note or Ultra devices these days are using the same technology on their S Pens. So you don't have to ever charge the stylus pen, and it's kind of the industry leader when it comes to responsiveness, in addition to the capacitive touchscreen layer on top. There's also a Type-C to Type-C cable for data transfer as well as charging. Now, speaking of the battery inside of the Viwoods AiPaper is 4,100 milliamp hours. Don't know how they squished it in to a frame this slim, but there we go, and it can actually last upwards of 4 weeks on standby time. Overnight with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth turned off, I saw 1% or even 0.5% of battery drain, and that is compared to on the Bigme Pro 10-inch e-ink tablet that we recently reviewed, drain closer to around 5 to 8% overnight. So they have done a very good job here, and this is definitely a device that will last you for days and days, just like on a reMarkable or Kindle, before you have to really reach for the charger. And that is further compared to with regular LCD or OLED screens that are much more glare prone. Plus, if you want to read it when you are outdoors, you have to crank the brightness all the way up, and that will dramatically reduce the battery life, making it great for productivity and also extremely easy and comfortable on the eyes. Now, one reason why this particular model is so slim though is just like the reMarkable 2, there is no front light layer built into the display stack. But as a result, the ink screen and glass feel like they're bonded together very tightly. There is no air gap, which we normally see on devices with a front light, such as the Book's Palma here or the Kindle Scribe has more of that air gap, which can add maybe just a little bit more reflection. However, it can be beneficial if you are in completely dark environments because the screen can light up. There's that glow light functionality, which we can kind of make out here perhaps if you are reading in bed and you can change the color temperature of that glow light to be warmer or colder. So that is technically one missing functionality here, but perhaps intentional to hit the even lighter and thinner frame, and making that e-ink screen almost fully laminated is actually pretty cool. As long as you have a little bit of light around you, if you're reading in daytime or have a small glow lamp, table lamp, you should still be fine. But just one thing to point out. Also, this included folio case is quite neat because inside of this super slim hinge, there's actually 2 more replacement nibs for the stylus pen that you can access inside of this tray. And that means even if you're traveling and the nib wears down, you'll always be carrying a spare with you at all times, which is really clever, I have to say. 2 more clever design touches in the hardware of the case is this little loop for holding the stylus more securely. You can actually fold down into this slot if you're not using it. And so if you wanted to, you can make that loop disappear from view and only rely on the magnets if preferred for a more simplistic setup. And secondly, even though the tablet here has super slim bezels, again, when you're sliding it into the case, it makes the left-hand hinge actually have a slightly larger width that's comfortable as you're holding onto it for reading purposes. Of course, the case can also fold all the way back here and still is extremely light. So they really thought through all aspects of the design, and clearly the hardware here is extremely impressive from an engineering point of view. Despite the ultra-thin and light frame, it still is very premium feeling because the side rails are constructed out of aluminum, and on the very bottom edge here you can see some embedded antenna lines as well as the USB Type-C port for charging, as well as an LED status light. And located on the very top of the device, just the power key / fingerprint scanner. It's kind of a ridiculous profile because the stylus here is even thicker than the tablet, as you can tell there. That being said, one I/O in the hardware that's missing would be a micro SD card slot to expand on the 128 gigabytes of built-in storage. There's also no cellular, 4G, or 5G capability, so it is using Wi-Fi for internet connectivity. Maybe those are aspects we'll see in a next-gen revision down the line. That being said, you can always rely on cloud storage options. It has pretty tight integration, in fact, with Outlook, including OneDrive, as well as using services like Google Drive if you want to access more cloud files, in addition to having Bluetooth built on in. So you can connect this to wireless keyboards if you're wanting to use it like a typewriter. You're able to do so, which the Kindle Scribe does not allow you to do. So that's quite flexible, even though there isn't an official keyboard case from Viwoods at this point in time. Last but not least, I'll mention that if you are looking for a slightly smaller screen eNote, they have also released a eNote Mini edition, which has instead around an 8-inch screen versus, again, this 10.65-inch panel, one which might be more comfortable for full-size PDFs and comics. Lastly, the back of the device here is crafted out of polycarbonate plastic, but still feels very sturdy, doesn't really flex or feel hollow. The included stylus pen from Viwoods also feels quite premium. There is a tapered edge here making it snap onto the tablet as well as prevent it from rolling around onto a table, along with featuring a eraser side as well that you can flip over in order to erase any markings you've made on the piece of paper, feeling quite natural. Overall, it is quite comfortable to use. Now, last but not least, let's do a quick size comparison with a few of the other larger eNote devices we've seen previously. For example, here's that aforementioned Kindle Scribe. This is the original version that has a 10.5-inch screen, so the Viwoods AiPaper is hair taller in terms of the screen size, again 10.6 inches instead. Also, the Kindle Scribe 1 and 2 have significantly larger bezels on the side that can be used for gripping the device, but definitely feels and looks maybe a little bit more cartoonish, as the AI paper here has a bit more of an industrial look to it. Here's how they stack up side by side, also in terms of the dimensions. And also, we recently checked out the Bigme B1051C. It also has a 10.5-inch screen. So out of the trio here, again, the Viwoods technically has just a slightly larger screen, as you can tell here on the top. Maybe an extra row of icons can be displayed. Another profile look here on the edge in terms of how the thickness there stacks up. Of course, with Bigme, they're one of the manufacturers that does offer color ink screens, but arguably if you're just reading back text or writing things down with a pencil or pen, perhaps a black and white screen is still preferred by many out there. As you can tell here, the whites look a little bit more natural compared to on a color ink screen, tends to skew a little bit more towards gray. And also the current state of color ink using Kaleido 3 has far fewer pixels for the color pigments, meaning the colors tend to look a little bit more washed out and also slightly grainy, not quite as clear as the black and white layer. So that's why, even though this technology is available, if you're just using it for regular reading as well as, again, basic note-taking, a black and white screen can still have certain advantages that some folks prefer if looking for even higher contrast as well as better sharpness. And lastly, here's a non-eNote device, but still a similar dimension tablet. It's the base iPad, and this one here has a nearly 11-inch screen, but you can see how it's going to be substantially thicker compared to the Viwoods here side by side. You can fit almost 2 of the Viwoods for the size of this one iPad. Now a closer look at the note-taking experience. As aforementioned, these previous Wacom EMR stylus pens will all be compatible with here if you want to choose other options, but the included one is already doing very well. And the eraser functionality of the Viwoods AiPaper also behaves very similar to the reMarkable 2, which is to say it's also going to be a little bit more accurate compared to the alternatives like Bigme as well as the Kindle Scribe. For instance, you can erase tiny portions of the notes that you're taking, and it's able to react very responsively to that. On the Bigme device, using the eraser nib required you to actually circle over the portion that you wanted to erase, and the entire screen would sometimes flash. As you can tell there, it's definitely a bit more janky. Although you can also choose a partial erase or range erase mode, it's also not as accurate. For example, if I try to erase over this portion here, you can see that it ends up also kind of flashing and maybe erasing a little bit more than I was expecting. So it just doesn't feel as natural or seamless as how Viwoods have integrated the eraser functionality to work on here. The optimization from a software perspective is surprisingly well done, and that level of polish is honestly a big reason and why I think it's one of my favorite large screen e-ink devices I've used yet. And I don't want to harp on Bigme too much, but just as a reminder, on that device, not only was the writing or inking part also having some lag at times, which I never encountered with the Viwoods, but also even the fingerprint scanner function that the tablet there also has requires you to sign in and create a Bigme account to use the fingerprint scanner, which thankfully is not something that you have to do with the Viwoods AiPaper. It works just like on any smartphone or tablet I've tried previously. You can set up a fingerprint the moment that you set up your device, without any funny business like requiring extra information or creating accounts just to use a hardware feature that you already purchased. The overall UI here is also quite intuitive, again definitely heavily inspired by the reMarkable's layout, but considering how easy it is to use, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. You're able to access various pen styles, including this calligraphy pen that we have here that looks something like this, versus other styles like the fountain pen here is going to look something like this instead, as well as the ballpoint pen and also a fine liner and a pencil, which does resemble charcoal quite well. In fact, perhaps it's with the pencil that you can see the tilt functionality work the best. So you can actually shade using the side of the pen like this versus a more sharp or thin stroke if you're actually using the pen on the fine tip, as you can tell. Then, of course, all the levels of pressure that you get similar to a regular pencil. There's also a highlighter mode. You can actually choose, it looks like, a couple of other colors for highlighter, including red, yellow, blue, and green, but since this is a black and white e-ink screen, it's not going to be visible in front of you unless you are exporting those documents to view on a computer or phone later on, then you'll see that color appear. The final option here being thinkers that looks something like this, a slightly more funky looking text. Additional menu options include one here for entering text. So again, you can use the virtual keyboard, you can use microphone for voice to text, or you can connect to a Bluetooth device and use a wireless keyboard instead. And the next tab over here is going to be AI functionality, since it is in the name of this device. It's essentially integrating functions like transcription, so it can convert your handwritten notes into text, as well as you can leverage large language models similar to ChatGPT for asking questions, generating summaries, and I think on a productivity-centric device like this, where you'll be doing more reading anyways, it actually isn't a bad idea to have this integration here. That being said, I do kind of wish that this AI button could be remapped possibly to other commands in the future, but it is what it is. Now again, if you are taking notes in this particular position and you find that the keys down below here are getting in the way, you are able to disable them when you're note-taking. And the way that you can do that is just by pulling down on the top right-hand corner for accessing commands like wireless options, as well as here you can click on button lock, and that will prevent these from being accidentally triggered when you are resting down and taking notes. In similar fashion, you have easy access to 3 refresh rate modes for the screen. There's a best display quality mode, which will show the highest detail and sharpness, compared to a ultra-fast refresh rate mode that might be suitable if you're scrolling quickly through a web page or trying to watch a video, even though that still isn't going to be the prime use case on a device like this, but it can definitely feel a little bit more responsive compared to past generations of e-ink screens. The screen's contrast level, as well as refreshing the screen to clear it from any ghosting or artifacts, plus casting it onto a wireless TV or monitor can all be triggered here as well. And so testing out some of these AI transcription functions, we have to be connected to the internet for this to work, but after a couple of seconds, you can see that it's automatically generated our handwritten notes into a typed format that might be easier for sharing. So it has hello world, calligraphy pen, fountain pen, plus the formatting even looks to be correct, which is quite impressive. As you can tell here, all of the punctuation is surprisingly accurate. So overall, this is working better than I expected. It's actually leveraging ChatGPT, as you can see here in the top left-hand corner. And we're also able to generate an article or analyze the content. So let's tap on generate an article. And now in real time, you can see the large language model starting to create an article based on the information it's parsed from that current page. For example, I'm exploring current writing tools, and it's comparing the differences between fountain pen versus ballpoint pen, fine liner, pencil, markers, and erasers, and drawing a quick conclusion. A feature like this might be more impactful if you are a student or perhaps a business professional taking notes in a meeting or a lecture. Let's also try the analyze content method instead. And it's telling us that it's detected that the language here is in English, and it's trying to experiment with different writing tools and their properties. It's describing here what it's seeing based on the computer vision here. We have the header, we have the description, as well as what it's trying to demonstrate. All of this is actually analyzed quite accurately. So yeah, I can see this being quite useful for note takers. Maybe if you scribbled down something but forgotten the context around it, the AI here is then trying to fill in some of the gaps and help re-jog your memory as well. And then that final AI assistant toggle will just bring up a pop-up that is just saying chat in AI paper, and it's actually attached a screenshot of the note. And from here, you're able to ask more specific questions like maybe travel plan or itinerary based on information such as dates available on the page. Things like that, it's going to be able to synthesize and generate. Also, in terms of model, you're able to pick between regular ChatGPT 4 or the mini model, plus they have DeepSeek integration here as well that you can play around with. And all of this is accessible even without requiring you to create an additional account. Previous chat history will also be displayed here as well. So overall, not bad. Undo and redo functions are pretty self-explanatory, and there's also a lasso functionality if you wanted to drag or rearrange different text that you've created into a smaller size or delete certain parts, in addition to transcribing specific parts into text. For example, we can circle on this area and then click on this. Now we have hello world. As you can tell here, that's been recognized based on what I wrote. For better organizational purposes, your notes can also be tagged for searching in the future. The grid function here allows you to take a look at all the different pages in your current journal and jump back and forth between those various pages, as well as experiment with additional layers. For example, if you are more of an artist, maybe you want to create an outline of something in one layer, and the second layer might be your actual coloring, and so you're able to make revisions and lock certain layers that you don't want to actually edit or modify. This is a little more powerful than what we saw on the Kindle Scribe. And down below here, you can also access a template change functionality, and there are plenty of options that you have pre-loaded. So aside from the blank canvas, you can also choose lined paper in different sizing formats, grid layout, dot format, music composition, as well as for business purposes, you can see a SWOT analysis template, a pyramid analysis, funnel analysis, are all examples that you can choose to use, and even more complex ones for maybe geometry, mathematics are also available down below. And you can also customize by uploading your own templates as a PNG and use those in the future. The next tab here allows you to encrypt certain notes that you're taking. For example, for higher privacy, you can set a password or require the fingerprint in order to read back a certain notebook. So if you have personal data or for business purposes that you want to keep confidential, you can actually encrypt your notebooks that you're using as well. Some final options here include changing the formatting here so that it shows up on the left or the right-hand corner instead, as well as you can share your journal using, for example, email, QR code, or Bluetooth, saving it as a PDF, text, or PNG image, as well as hide all of the menus here from view for a more blank canvas if you don't want that to get in the way. So overall, it's working quite nicely. This was a rough sketch, just, again, testing out the pressure sensitivity capabilities of the screen, actually looking quite realistic. For reference, here's kind of a graph paper or dot paper format instead. The responsiveness and latency are all among the best out of the larger screen eNotes I've tested to date, feeling extremely responsive. And it's good to see that on page to page, you can change the template. It doesn't have to be the same across the entire notebook. As you can see here on this page, we now have a more traditional lined paper versus the chart view. So you're able to choose and select. Now, you can also long hold on the home key, by the way, for a couple of additional seconds to pull up a task manager. For multitasking, you're able to close out of background apps or jump back and forth between open ones. And so aside from this journaling section, you can also find a couple of other tiles for features here, including one called Picking, which is more of a screenshot capability that you can access anywhere across the UI. So let's say I'm reading back an article on the browser and I wanted to use that function. I can actually swipe over using the stylus on the top right-hand corner diagonally, and then click on either annotate or crop. So if I choose this option here, I'm going to be able to, for example, highlight certain words and revisit certain ideas that I am taking a look at. And now we can see that screenshot with annotation available in this picking section. So it's actually quite useful if you are looking for that annotation capability on top of anything that you're accessing with the tablet. As for the meeting tile, it's using a template that might be a little bit more suited for taking quick notes during a meeting, including attendee names, as well as different contents that you can then scribble down below. A couple of other examples, including business follow-ups, client meetings, team meetings, to-do list, task management, can also be quickly switched on the fly. With that being said, the meeting notes here, interestingly enough, by default, doesn't include a voice recorder aspect, at least in their native app. That might have been interesting to explore if you want to capture kind of a snippet and then listen back to that while you are note-taking or transcribe the audio into text. But the beauty is it's running on Android, so you can always download a third-party app to experience that if you're looking for it. For instance, Viwoods also includes a app store here with some of their recommended Android apps, including Otter here, which is a voice notes app that lets you take notes, transcribe them into text later on. Using an open source operating system, you could always leverage other tools and apps if you're looking for them to further round out the experience based on what you're using it for. Download APK Pure App Store instead of the Google App Store if you don't want to use Google services. Other cloud file transfer options, including dictionary apps, calculator app, can all be downloaded because by default it is extremely clean without really any extras, bloatware, or even utilities pre-installed. So you can choose to click those and install them if you are using them. The next tile here called Learning is really just where your own documents are housed. That can be files that you transfer over into the device's storage, or you can also use wireless file transfer as well, although that will require you to create an account. But PDFs, as you can tell here, can be fully read. And again, you're able to annotate over all of the PDFs as well in real time, feeling quite responsive. So this can be a great tool for any textbooks. And we have access to pretty much all of the same functions that we saw earlier. For example, there you can see how the bold font on and off will affect the way that the screen there looks. So you can further play around with this to improve the visibility if necessary. Within the PDF, you can also search specific keywords, add additional bookmarks, and over here you're able to check out different annotations and notes that you've taken across different pages and jump between the specific notes. Plus, the typical table of contents can also be found here for jumping into different parts of the book if it's a longer document. And you can also long hold, for example, to specifically highlight, transcribe, and open up certain links which might be embedded onto documents here, similar to other e-readers that we've seen previously. But the experience here feels overall quite smooth when it comes to the optimization, and the display here is clear and sharp enough that it makes it still an enjoyable experience overall. The calendar tile up top here can also be helpful if you're just trying to jot down certain events, and you're able to, again, freely annotate over the entire virtual calendar and have a template down below here for adding things that you want to accomplish during those dates, adding in different events, and they have Outlook integration as well. Again, using this as basically your digital notebook for productivity, keeping notes, as well as getting things done. Now, on the very left corner here, the tab also allows you to quickly jump between some of those core functions that we just went through. For instance, the full list of applications. If you don't want to tap on the tile, you can instead click on this button here to jump into that view instead. Going into the calendar view, starting a new meeting note or memo, general PDFs and EPUBs that you want to read back can also be, again, accessed directly using this bar here on the side. And the final tab here is just going to be advanced settings. Pretty self-explanatory, but you can change things like the font size. The pen's pressure sensitivity can also be adjusted here as well. And under general, you're able to set different wallpapers. As a reminder, e-ink only draws a little bit of power when the screen is refreshing or the pixels are being rearranged. So if it's sitting persistently on this image without it being refreshed, it actually draws no juice at all, which is why you can have an always-on screensaver or lock screen and have it look just a little bit more interesting as it's sitting there on your desk. Again, a fingerprint scanner is also relatively fast and responsive in my testing. Finally, underneath here, you can also find the Google Play Services tab that you can turn on and off. If you're trying to leverage Google Apps, or if you want to keep it more simple and minimalistic, you can actually turn it off instead. Plus, the final tab here is going to be updates. There will be some sporadic software updates over the air that improves on the system stability, optimizing and adding more functions. And to Viwoods' credit, using this for a couple of days, I've already received 1 to 2 software updates, so they have been pretty diligent about this. For example, some new features that they are adding include synchronization one-click to Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox. Plus, aside from the PDF and EPUB file formats, it can now have native support for MOBI and AZW file formats as well. Again, if there are any other niche file formats that you want to read back on this thing that isn't included by default, the beauty of this is it's running on Android, like we said before. So you're able to just use any other reading app and leverage that instead. For example, the Kindle App Store, if you have some purchased content, you can just log in with your Amazon account and read those back from here instead. Let's also take a quick look here at that AI-specific button. So like we mentioned, anywhere in the UI, you're able to jump into this ChatGPT prompt, or if you long hold for a couple of seconds, we can now talk using the microphones to the large language model. And release after a couple of seconds, it'll be able to transcribe that into text. As you can tell here, actually working pretty well from the point of accuracy. One final UI element that might be a little overlooked is on the top right-hand corner. There's also a universal search tab. So as you label different journals that you're taking, you're able to search for specific keywords and find those pages as well as documents to open up. Now, what are some of the potential missing aspects? Well, for one, this particular model doesn't come with a built-in speaker. Not that it really needs one, I think, because it has Bluetooth. You can connect to wireless headphones if you wanted to listen to audiobooks, for example, or listen to the AI kind of talk back at you. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Also, the AI paper here does not have cameras built in on this current revision, but that's also pretty much matching what the reMarkable and the Kindle Scribe have done as well. So you can't use it for, say, video conferencing or scanning in documents, but again, the core experience is handled extremely well. Here's also a calculator view, which is just standard calculator from Android, but it also is just looking quite minimalistic in this giant, beautiful e-ink screen. Also, just for reference, here's what it looks like if you're trying to use it to read back some web articles. It, I think, looks best if it's mainly a text article at the end of the day. Now, you saw it blink there because right now we are in the highest resolution mode, so it's going to look the sharpest for details like text as well as images. But if you want to make it a little bit smoother and slightly decrease the screen's sharpness, you can use the faster refresh rate. It's not going to blink quite as well, but images might be a little bit softer, but better for things like scrolling or quick video clips of the news, for example. And we have access to pinch and zoom support as well to make it a little bit larger as you're reading back text. Looking quite good. In similar fashion, this giant screen makes it a joy for consuming some comics as well, even webtoons. Here's a quick example of us just scrolling through some of the content. Again, looking great and feeling really comfortable as well as you're holding it in your hands. So there we have it. That's been our closer look at the Viwoods AiPaper. And as aforementioned, even though this is a slightly newer player or brand in this space, it's super impressive how much they got right on their first generation attempt. It's basically taking the best of the reMarkable 2 from the minimalism and the excellent note-taking experience, the super seamless and fast latency of the stylus pen with pressure sensitivity, and coupling that with the flexibility of a more open source Android operating system with faster internals. Not to mention one of the sharpest screens that I've seen yet, thanks to a super minimal gap between the glass and the e-ink panel, all wrapped in an incredibly slim and lightweight frame that feels almost impossible. I mean, it's almost funny at this point because there are many brands out there that have been making these type of devices for years and years and still struggle to create a device which is as streamlined and well optimized as this one is, despite this coming from a new player. It is very impressive to see on both a hardware as well as a software level. So again, it's perhaps one of my favorite large screen eNote or e-ink tablet devices I've seen to date. Kind of a masterclass, in fact, in how a device like this should be, in my opinion. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below. That's been the Viwoods iNote 10.65-inch e-ink tablet.